Okay, so I'd like to move on at this time to method number 2, factoring by multiplying a times c and then moving into factoring by grouping. And so at the same time, I am going to show what factoring by grouping looks like. So let me just start with this first example, 6x squared minus x minus 2. We did that with method number 1. Now let's watch how it's done with method number 2. Multiply a times c. 6 times negative 2 is negative 12. What I have done is I've combined all the information in the factors of these two lists into a single number, negative 12. Now what I'm going to do with that negative 12 is look at the factors of this number. So 1 times negative 12, 2 times negative 6, and so on, that add up to give me the middle coefficient, negative 1. So let me just keep going with these factors. How about 3 times negative 4? That's it. I could keep going, but I don't need to list the additional factors of negative 12. What am I going to do with this 3 times negative 4? Well, what we're going to do with that is expand the middle term of the original trinomial. So now expand the middle term using these numbers, okay? And this is what it looks like. My trinomial 6x squared minus x is now going to become plus 3x minus 4x, and then I still have the minus 2 on the end. So notice how right here I've used these two numbers. I stick an x on it to expand the middle term. Notice that if you combine those terms, you would get negative x. But I'm expanding it so that I can now factor by grouping. And when you factor by grouping, you're just trying to group together with an even number of groups terms within the polynomial. For example, I can make two groups of 2 instead of looking at the entire thing altogether. And here are my two groups of 2. And with the first group, I am going to take out or factor out the greatest common factor, which to me appears to be 3x. I'm going to take the 3x and write in parentheses what I'm left from these two terms. This would be a 2x. I took 3x out, so I have to be left with plus 1. If you take the entire term out, you got to leave a 1 behind, because if you were to multiply that back through, you'd have to end up with the same thing. Now what I'm going to try to do in factoring some sort of common factor from the next two terms is I'm going to try to end up with this 2x plus 1, because I want a common binomial factor for the next step. What I'm going to have to do here then, I can factor out a 2, but in fact I'm also going to take out that negative. Factor out a negative 2. And what that leaves me with is positive 2x plus 1 as these two terms. If you want to double check, multiply that negative 2 back through, and you'll see that you get those two terms. Now, this is equal to that. Notice I've got something sneaky here. I have got a common binomial factor. So common factors, they don't have to be single digit, they don't have to be single terms. They can be binomial factors. And what I can do with that is factor out the common binomial factor. And when I factor out the common binomial factor, what I end up with is the following. There's my common binomial factor. Okay. And let me just put a little set of braces here to show what I'm left, and to try to highlight the process a little bit better. I'm left with 3x minus 2. And it makes sense because I'm looking at 2x plus 1 as an entire term in and of itself, as if it were a singular entity. If you did 2x plus 1 times 3x and 2x plus 1 times negative 2, you would end up with what we had there in the middle step. So indeed it is correct. And then we write it out like this, with just using parentheses, 2x plus 1 times 3x minus 2, and there are our final factors. You don't have to put the braces, that middle step. I was just trying to do that to highlight the concept. So with this example being shown, let's try it with the next example. Again, we're going to start by multiplying a times c. 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. Then I'm looking at the factors of negative 10 that add up to 9. You can list everything if you want, but you don't have to go through the entire list, especially if it's visually clear what two things multiply to give you negative 10 that also add to give you positive 9. And to me, that looks like 10 times negative 1. That gives me a negative 10. When I add those, I get 9. So I've already got the numbers I need. I am going to expand the middle term by those numbers. 2x squared plus 10x minus 1x, or simply minus x, minus 5. Now proceed to factoring by grouping. I'm going to group these two, group those two. And you have to have even groups, okay? I couldn't do 3 and 1. It's got to be 2 and 2. Let me take out the common factor here, which appears to be a 2x. I'm left with x plus 5. I want to try to get another x plus 5 from these guys, and it looks like I can factor out a negative 1. Parentheses, that would leave me with x plus 5. All right, I got the common binomial factor. Getting the common binomial factor, I can factor that out. There's my x plus 5, and what I'm left with are these two guys, 2x minus 1 in the other set of parentheses. And there it is. Not too bad. Perhaps you may prefer method number 2. I don't know. Always remember to double check before you employ a method to look for a greatest common factor and take that out first. And that's going to be especially important for method number 3. So let me highlight that as I show method number 3.